Hey, there we go. Thank you so much, Louise for being here on the You Make It Happen podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about your background, a little bit about your backstory, and how you got to where you're at?
Absolutely. So now I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and speak to your listeners and stuff. And I've been listening to your podcast and
Oh, thank
oh my
you.
God, love the content. It's
Really?
so I'm really privileged to actually be able to speak to you on this podcast. So I am a female empowerment coach. I am a motivational speaker, and mum of four daughters. I'm an entrepreneur, like all of the hats. And my background, I was raised by an emotionally abusive father, and my mum was in survival mode. And because of the trauma that resulted when he left, so I was discarded when I was about 15 years old. And that played a massive part in this kind of unraveling. I lost my identity. I didn't know who I was because he had been very controlling. So I'd spent my life trying to be who he wanted me to be, and when he was no longer there to give me a direction and tell me this is who you have to be, I was like, okay. So I kind of like at 15 I had a mental breakdown and kind of like this whole identity crisis of who am I. And then of course there was a toxic person that stepped in and was like, I'll tell you who you need to be.
I'll tell you
And
exactly who you are. Let me dictate to you your identity.
Exactly. Like, oh, look, you're this person that doesn't wear heels and doesn't wear dangly earrings, and you are this kind of person. And so I ended up, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. This must be love,
Yep.
because everybody had told me that my father had loved me. So I associated a lot of the behavior, a lot of the feelings that I had with him that I now realize, like, that's anxiety, that's depression, that's gaslighting, all of that. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
I labeled all of that as how it felt to be in love or to be loved. So when I
Okay.
felt that way with somebody else, I was like, "Oh my God, this is love! It's like a Disney film." Um, and ended up marrying him. Had two children. But there was one thing I always said. I was like, well, actually, there were two. I always said that I'd never allow myself to be cheated on, and I would never allow myself to be abused.
Yeah.
Now, in my head, like even at that point, and it was like I thought I would know when I was
Yeah.
being abused. Because I
But
was
we
like, oh
don't. We don't see it when
no,
we're in it.
yeah. And so he cheated, and I found out that he was cheating. And like his affair started when our youngest was like 6 months old. So it was really like we got married within 9 months. I'd given birth to our first daughter, and then like 18 months after. So the marriage only actually lasted like 2 years before I found
Yeah.
out he was cheating. So I filed for divorce
Good for
because of his
you, which is
affair.
really
And
hard.
then, yeah, and it was, but I was like, I'm not going to do, because I knew my father had cheated on my mum for years, but she'd never left him. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm not going to do that. I filed for divorce, got a divorce. And then in 2015 in the UK, emotional abuse became illegal. And it was
Hmm.
in all of the papers, all about what emotional abuse is. And I sat there and it was like a checklist for my marriage. I was like, oh,
Wow.
that and that and that and that. And it was at that point that I found out that actually I'd been in an emotionally abusive relationship. I'd experienced everything that was now illegal and everything else. But it was like, oh, well, what do I do?
Exactly.
So it was this whole unraveling. Um, because of me filing for the divorce prior to it being illegal, like there was nothing that could be done.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but it also the help that I got was very difficult to process. So because of being in the UK, I managed to get some help through the NHS.
Okay.
So,
Good.
and I was given some CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, where you learn these
Yes.
basics. But I was given that on the basis that after I'd filed for divorce, I was struggling so much with my mental health that I was a danger to myself.
Okay. So
And
they gave it
so
to you
they were
for that
like,
reason?
yeah. So, and it's because when my father had left when I was 15, I had actually attempted to take my own life. And that was the
Yeah.
first time I attempted. So I had a history of it. So they were like, okay, well, we'll give you this help. what they did was basically got me to a plateau. Like, we just don't want you struggling anymore. Like, we don't want you to have, like, we don't want you to do anything stupid. And that was it. And after that, it was like, okay, well, that's all well and good. And we're just going to leave you now. And I had no idea about how to build myself up. They didn't give me enough knowledge or understanding. Like, where do I go from here? It was like, we've just taken you off the ledge and now we're just going to leave you there.
Oh,
We're not
great.
going to tell you what's next steps.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started really looking into my healing journey and everything else when I found out I'd experienced emotional abuse. And I was like, well, maybe that's why I'd reached that point. Maybe that's why I felt that way when my father left. And so,
Right.
you know, I started looking into it. And I had two girls that were going to grow up with an emotionally abusive father.
Right.
I had two daughters because because I couldn't do anything because it was only illegal after the divorce, like
Right.
no legal help, still can't really get any recognition or anything for it in the UK. Um, so, because they don't know how to identify it or how to prosecute for it or anything else because
Right.
it's
It's
just the
difficult.
police don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was going to have these two daughters that were growing up with an emotionally abusive father, the same that I had. And I was
Right.
like, I don't want them to normalize this behavior. I don't want them to normalize and make the mistake that I made or go through what I went through.
Yeah.
Everything I did became, what can I learn that I can teach my children so that they don't repeat what I went through? So
Yes.
it wasn't like because at that point, like I had experienced financial abuse, like I had very little. It wasn't like I could afford for us all to go through family therapy. It wasn't like I could afford for all of us to have counseling and all of this kind of thing. So it was like, what can I teach them to change this narrative?
Right.
And so I just looked, and that's it. And I just looked and researched and learned everything I could so that I could pass on that knowledge to them.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And you mentioned the abuse empowered framework or the abuse empowered network. Can you explain a little bit about what that is to our listeners that don't know?
Yeah, so I after many years, because I'm one of these person I if something works for me, I'm like, I love it. Now I need to know why.
Yes,
You
yes, same,
don't
same.
just give me surface level and tell me to do something. That's probably trauma. Like I've been told what to do. Now I need to
But
know
I have
why.
to know why. I know I had a
Like
friend harass me about that once. Why do you need to know why? I'm like, because I do. I need to know why.
yeah, so it makes me feel better. Like I just need
Yes,
to know. So I
yes,
will learn something. I found EFT really helpful tapping. So
yes.
the tapping that you loved it, got a qualification in it.
Awesome.
This
Love
is
that.
it. I'm like, I'm going to become a practitioner in it. If it works for me, I want to study. I want to get the courses. I want to find out all I can about it. So I'm
Yes,
not just doing it because I know that I should do it. I know that, oh, okay, this is why. This is how it reframes my mind, all of that stuff.
right.
So I ended up with like 20 tools and techniques, 20 different things. And I'm like, this is what I used that I found really impactful. I found changed the way that I actually lived my life and went through my day to day and everything else like that. And I created a framework. And so there were four main sections. So you've got so strong foundations, which this is about picking apart all of the bits that were like, this is who you are,
Hmm.
like being told by other people, this is who you are, this is who you have to be, this is who you should be. And it's actually picking apart all of that and finding out who you actually are. Because
Okay.
if you build your life and your dreams, your dream life and your aspirations based on who other people think you should be, you're never going to feel good. You're never going to feel fulfilled. And
Absolutely.
when life knocks you down, it's going to take everything with it. You need those strong foundations, those core, that no matter what happens in life, you know that this is solid. And anything that happens in life, it will never take away these foundations from me because this is who I authentically am. So the first thing that
Yes.
we do is we find our strong foundations, connect with who we are. And that's through understanding like gratitude journaling, not just a pretty little practice that you write 3 things in the morning, but actually the
Yes.
essence of it, how it rewires the reticular activating system, the RAS in the brain, and all of this. It's that, and saying, okay, this is why it works. This is
Yes.
the tool. You can then go and apply it. And then journaling and meditation, all of these different techniques. Then you go on to You Are Enough, which is about understanding the subconscious mind and reprogramming the subconscious mind. Because now you know who you are. It's like, okay, well, look, what limiting beliefs do I have that are holding me back? And how
Hmm.
do I create new beliefs, new neural pathways that are actually going to, because now I know who I am, I need
Right.
to get rid of everything else that tells me otherwise. And so we reprogram
Yes.
your mind so that you are enough. It's all of the negative sayings that other people are saying. It's like, no, I am enough. And I know I'm enough because I know my authentic self. My authentic self is amazing. So, like, I
Yes.
know that I'm good enough. And it's reprogramming that. Then gaining clarity, where you start to envision the life that you want and kind of like then you can start creating your dreams, your vision boards, and like, this is where I want to be. And you know where you are going and where you want to be comes from a place that is right for you and not because other people have told you that you should want these things. But it's like, no, this is my future. It's what I
Yeah.
want. And then moving forward, which is about creating the habits and the the day-to-day routines and how to bring all of this in so that you've got like day-to-day practices, like you've got the structure, you've got the all the processes that work to make your life continue in the direction that you're going. And then and that's it. And so it's like these 4 sections to rebuild your life, and each section has like 5 different modalities that you use to kind of like really draw in on who you are.
I love that. That is fantastic. And I know you were too humble to talk about this, but I will bring it up for you. Will you tell our listeners about your TEDx talks?
Yeah, so I've actually done 2 TEDx talks. The first one, because of some legal ruling, so because of some terminology that I used within my talk, where I spoke about my ex-husband and my father
Mhm.
as being my abuser, as being abuse everything, and so I use that terminology.
Right.
But prior to it being illegal in the UK, it's an accusation without conviction.
Ah,
So there is and because there was so much going on, and so it was in 2022, and because there was so much going on, then it's like, well, actually, they wouldn't allow it. Now, the thing is, because
oh,
I've actually sought legal representation, so in the UK, I can do that because I actually have evidence. So it's not like
it's
if they were
not,
going to
it's
defamation and everything else, but Ted were
right.
just like for legal reasons. And I was like, that's okay. The talk that I did was about the domestic abuse laws and experiencing abuse prior to the laws and how frustrating it was to not actually get any understanding or clarity or like because you were just hit with dead ends again and again and again. So it was kind of
Yes.
ironic that that happened. But it did give me the opportunity. It gave me a fantastic opportunity that I then went and I applied again, and I went through and was selected to be a speaker for TEDx Wolverhampton 2024. And this time I did a talk on understanding toxic relationships.
Hmm.
Uh, what are they? And so that's what I did a talk on. And so it was an amazing opportunity. And I realized that sometimes when we feel like things are falling apart, I did a talk on my past and my view of the past and my experiences of the past. And it's almost like that's not what you're meant to be known for. That's not what
Right.
that's meant to be out there. And that's not meant to be your legacy. That's not meant to be. And so it was like a gift in a way, the fact that it was like, no. that happened to you, but that isn't going to define you. Whereas this talk about toxic relationships and helping people understand them and everything else, that's your legacy. That's what's meant to be out there. And so
Yes,
it's a beautiful opportunity to realize that simply because something doesn't work out the way that you thought it should, it doesn't mean that it is not happening in your favor. And so
exactly.
like
Exactly.
and so I've had the incredible opportunity of actually speaking on that stage again and sharing about my knowledge, but a much more forward-thinking view instead of my previous talk that was very focused on my experience and what I'd gone through in the past.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I couldn't agree more. And I know some people call it God, some people call it the universe. I call it the universe. I think the universe, puts us on our path and conspires to, I mean, I don't know if you've read The Alchemist. I was talking with Raimi about The Alchemist in episode 5. The universe conspires to help you when you're on your path. And sometimes that comes in the form of things that look like horrible events or shitty things that happen. And you don't necessarily know why that's happening at the time. But then, years later, or sometimes months later, and hell, sometimes minutes later, I mean, sometimes it happens instantaneously.
Yeah.
You can see, oh, I can see why that happened. Oh, that seemed like it was a bad thing, my car breaking down on the side of the road. And like when I'd had a 12-hour day and I was miserable and crying. And actually it ended up saving my life because this and this and this happened. And it seems like these obstacles and horrible things and the bad things that happen to us are put in our path. I think a lot of people look at that as, oh, why is this happening to me? Which is like the victim mentality. When when you've done enough work, you get to that point of what is this trying to teach me? And what is this trying to teach me? Why is it happening for me? Like, what do I need to learn from this?
Yeah, and it's like, and I, hands up, I'm not going to pretend that I was gracious for that
Oh
year.
no, it's okay. You're like,
I
oh yay, thanks for giving me that
I went
abusive
full
relationship.
victim mentality. I was
Yes.
going to do scathing talks on like
You're like,
social
fuck
media,
these
blasting
guys.
tenets. Like, how could they do this? This is exactly my point. Like going off on an entire tangent about
Yes.
how hard that was and kind of wallowing and just yelling to the world that I was a victim and everything else. And actually, I didn't. I just
Well, and
never
that's
seemed
where
to
you
get into.
found success in not doing that.
Yeah, and it was just realizing, and then it wasn't until after I'd written my talk and I'd submitted it, and I spoke to some of the other people and that had been there for my first talk, and they kind of like that they were there with my application. They're like, "This is so much better. This
Yeah,
is this is so much better. This is like a really empowering. This is amazing." And it was
right.
almost like the universe kind of like, "Nice try, but that's not quite what we you go and try and do it again, like a
Try
teacher.
again, try again.
I've gone and done my homework. I'm like, huh? And they're like, you're going to be a TEDx speaker. Yay! Here's my talk. And they're like,
Try it again.
no, try again. Handed it back to me, sent me on my way. And I was just like,
I
so
know,
I
right?
was not gracious for the entire, and it took a lot for me to actually apply again.
Yeah,
It was really, really difficult, and it was touch and go for a long time as to whether or not I would. But I knew in my heart, I knew in my soul, it was like it was almost like I hadn't fulfilled. It was like I knew I'm meant to experience this, but because my talk hadn't gone on the YouTube channel, it was like it felt a bit anticlimactic. Like,
yeah.
mm, like it was on the vision board and I was classed as a TEDx speaker, even though it didn't get online. But it was still like, that's not how it's meant to be. It just didn't
Right.
feel complete. So I was like, I'm going to have to do this again until I get that feeling of completion. And so I did it again and then I got there. So it's been amazing.
I mean, that's incredible. Well, it's like it's that victim mentality, right? As soon as you start blaming other people and sounding more and more like a victim, which, a lot of people have been victims and that's okay, but you give away your power when you blame other
Yeah.
people. And when we take accountability for this is my role in this, and I sat back and did nothing, or I, didn't have any self-esteem, or I hadn't done the work on myself, or this was my accountability in how I became a victim, we take back our power
Yeah.
because then we assume control of that role, right? Whereas when we're saying, oh, it's his fault and it's their fault and it's their fault and it's their fault, we're blaming other people. We're giving them all of the control, all of the
And
control.
actually, that whole aspect of taking back my power just
Yeah.
by taking action, it's
Yes.
like, it's that thing that sometimes, like, wallowing in victim mentality, you don't take action at that point, and so you don't progress out of it. Whereas when you get to that point and you're like, I'm tired of feeling this way, I'm going to take action. And when I started taking action and I got my power back, and I was like, oh yeah, that's it. This isn't
That
this.
feels better.
And it does. And
Yeah.
so even when we feel like we've got that, and even after all of the healing that I've done, everything else, like I still wallowed in victim mentality for a long time, longer than I should have, but I got myself back out of it. And I
Very
think it's that.
powerful.
It's like nobody gets to that point where they never fall and fail. It's just getting to that point where you pick yourself up quicker. And
Yes.
that's
Yes.
it.
Yes. And we don't repeat the same mistakes as frequently or as many times or as badly as we did the first time. Like, yes, it takes so much rewiring. You were talking about the neural pathways and rewiring your brain. It takes so much practice to rewire your brain. I mean, it just doesn't happen after one or two or even 10 or 15 tries or repetitions, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like building your muscles at the gym. Like you don't go to the gym and the next day you're like, well, why haven't I gained 20 pounds in muscle? Like I went to the gym last night. Well, it doesn't work that way, sweetheart. Like you have to go over and over and over again. And your brain is no exception. You have to practice and build these neural pathways and keep doing the work over and over and over again until your brain learns new neural pathways, like with gratitude journaling, like you mentioned earlier. Like you're building those neural networks that say, oh, we're going to focus on positive reframing. Like we're going to focus on gratitude, which means like during times of darkness and sadness and grief and anguish and misery and just, depression, I can lean into joy and I can focus on gratitude because I've built these new healthy neural pathways, right?
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
sitting with those, and it's realizing that when I'm sat in those moments, when I am wallowing, when I
Yeah.
am when I am being in my victim mentality, or when I am feeling the sadness and the grief, and when I am in those negative emotions, it's also giving yourself the grace of like, I'm going to allow myself to feel this because I also know that I have the capacity to get out of it.
Right.
The only time that those ever feel overwhelming is when you forget that you have the power to get out of it. And
Yes.
actually, it's sitting and saying, I'm going to let myself feel really, really sad about this because I'm entitled to feel sad and hurt
Right.
and upset. I'm allowed to get angry about this, and
Yes.
allowing all of those negative emotions. And you can sit in them without being overpowered by them when you know that you have the ability to get out of them. And that's the
Exactly.
difference. It's just always bearing that in mind. It's like, I'm allowed to feel sad. I'm allowed to feel upset. I'm allowed to feel that way because I'm human. It's part of it.
Yes.
But I always have the capacity to get out of those situations again.
Yes. And reminding yourself and training your brain and reminding over and over and over again, I am not going to feel this way forever. Even though
Yes.
I feel down and I'm miserable and I'm depressed and I feel like there's no end in sight, I'm like, wait a minute, I know there's an end in sight logically. And I just need to feel the misery, the downness, the depression, the sadness, the grief, the anger, the rage, the infuriation, the injustice, the whatever you're feeling. Like let yourself feel it because we know what happens when we don't let ourselves feel these things, when we repress, when we bottle when oh no, oh, bad things happen. Bad things happen.
And what you realize is a lot of the times when you start to sit with those feelings and stuff, and it feels very overwhelming, it's because you're not just feeling that for this situation, you're feeling the buildup of everything that you never experienced before. So that's why it feels so much bigger. And then as you allow yourself to feel it a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, eventually you get to that point that the buildup of the backlog from your childhood, from your teenage years, from all of
Yes.
the career and the job and everybody else and all of that, you've cleared so much of the backlog. So now there's less. Now you're just feeling what's happening at the moment. And
Yes.
all of the rest of it has now been dealt with and processed. So it's
Right.
kind
Which
of like,
takes a shit ton of work. Let's be like,
oh,
let's be clear. This takes a shit ton of work. For all you listening, and they're like, "Oh, how do I do that tomorrow?" You don't do that tomorrow.
you don't do that tomorrow. It's, oh, I find it so funny when people talk about the dark night of the soul. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, ah, that's the night. No, you don't delude yourself. That's not a night.
Yeah, that's
It's,
not a night, sweetheart. That's like, a
it's
year or
complete
5 years.
misrepresentation. No.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. At least, I mean, my listeners hear it from me, but now I get other people to say, "Hey, hey, she's not full of shit. Missy actually knows what she's talking about occasionally."
Oh my God, you really do. Listening, I'm just
Thank
like, oh my God, yes, yes,
you.
that's it.
Thank you so much. Well,
It's
I mean,
not
I like to,
right.
right, and I like to remind my listeners, like, I am not a mental health practitioner. I am not a psychological expert. I have taken this on as my passion and as my hobby because of my background, because of my trauma, because of my family and my framework and what I went through. Because my brother
Hmm.
is a psychopath and my mom is undiagnosed borderline personality disorder, borderline sociopathic, just no empathy. And I was raised by a woman with no empathy, but I didn't become a psychopath like my brother because I had an au pair that lived with me when I
Yeah.
was little. And I was lucky enough to have an au pair, a nanny who genuinely loved me, even just for a short time, that completely altered the course of my life to the point where I grew up and I almost became borderline. Like I was this close, like one symptom
Yeah.
away from borderline diagnosis, by the time I stepped foot into therapy. But I did step foot into therapy instead of killing myself and said,
Hmm.
this is the path I want to go down. And I want to work on making myself better and not finding myself in an early grave. And what can I do to do that? And then once I started down that road and started doing a lot of work on myself, I was like, holy shit, I am wonderful and I am worth saving and I am a good human being and I'm not my brother and I'm not my mother. Like just because I was born into this abusive family and my father was verbally abusive, just because I was born into this doesn't mean that that defines who I am. Like I can break this cycle. And I
Yeah.
think for the most part that I have. And so like this has all just become a passion of mine. I don't have any degree in psychology, although I would love a PhD in psychology and I have considered applying to Cambridge. So I may be moving to see you soon.
Ooh. Oh, we'll
Yeah.
meet up for coffee and put the
Yeah,
world to rights.
absolutely.
But the thing is, it's one of those things. I did want to study psychology when I was leaving school.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had to get a job, and I like
Well, yeah,
how to
you've
say,
got
we were too
kids.
poor in
Yeah.
order to pay for me to go. Like, I left
Oh, I
school
get it.
to the foundation one apprenticeship because it meant that I could get paid work.
Yes,
And that's
yes.
what I did because I had to earn because we had nothing and my mum needed the money. So it was one of those things. But then as I started, like, the more I've researched, the more I looked into it, and people have asked me, I have some huge issues around studying psychology and all of that kind of thing, and the labels that they give people and the way that they are not trauma informed. And as I
They're
don't
not
know
trauma
what it's like in,
informed. I know.
I don't know what it's like in America, but in the UK, it
That's what
is
it's
very,
like here.
will just be given tablets and pills. Let's not find out why you're going through this, but let's just give you a diagnosis and some medication and that will treat any, you're treating the symptoms, but you're not treating the root cause. So I have some issues with that. And I find that a lot of the people that I actually encounter that do have, like when I went for my CBT, not trauma informed, she
Oh yeah.
gaslit me. She
Yeah.
also compounded some of the trauma that I'd experienced by telling me, I'm sure he didn't mean that.
Oh fuck no. Absolutely not. Like that's
Oh
an
my
abusive fucking
God. Like,
therapist. That's
exactly.
abusive.
But she had the qualifications and she
Oh
was
yeah.
sat in that office and she had the authority
Oh yeah.
and it was one of those things that, but she didn't have the experience and
Nope.
she didn't know what it was like. And trying to explain trauma bonding to
You
somebody that
can't
hasn't
explain
experienced
that.
trauma bonding, it is insane. It's like trying to explain to somebody that's never given birth what it feels like to give birth. They're
Right.
never going to understand because you can't articulate the experience, which is why I think there is so much more power in actually things like this podcast where we talk not from a,
Yes.
well, I've got all of these qualifications and I read about what
Yes.
you've gone through in a book. It's like, no, I've sat in that space and I've been in that turmoil and I have felt those emotions. And it's
Right.
that that other people are like, oh, you get it. And that's
Right.
what we need. That's why I talk on stage. That's why I'm a motivational speaker. That's why I travel up and down the country, because people need to hear you're not
Yes.
alone,
You're
and
not
there is,
alone.
and what you experienced is not unusual and it's not your fault, but you
Yes.
do have power over the situation. Like victim mentality is sitting, they did this to me, whereas taking back that power is like, they did this to me because I allowed them to do that to me for so
Because I
long,
let,
and I can
yes.
stop it ever happening again by never allowing that to happen again.
Exactly. Thank you. Oh my God, that was the perfect wording of that. I couldn't have said it better if I had written out a speech and edited it for a week. That was just perfect.
I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that you got it recorded, because the thing is, I just end up with like verbal diarrhea where words fall out of my mouth.
You and me
And
both.
I will never remember what I said again.
Well, fortunately, it's going to be memorialized permanently on a record in our podcast episode. So I am excited.
I'll
Um,
listen back, I'll take it down, and I'll put it on a little caption in Instagram somewhere.
Yeah, well, actually, there'll be a transcription. Spotify and I think maybe Apple too. I don't know. I know Spotify for sure transcribes. For people that can't actually listen, they transcribe. So you can hopefully you can just fucking copy and paste it. That way you don't even have to write it. You don't even have to transcribe. But it leads me. This segues perfectly. This segues perfectly. This is the perfect time for this for everybody out there that doesn't know the difference or doesn't understand the difference. Can you delineate and differentiate the difference between a toxic relationship and an abusive relationship? Because you and I know that those are drastically different, but I think there's a lot of people that don't understand the differences.
Yeah, so a toxic relationship is a relationship where you put on a false persona in order to maintain the relationship. And this could be because the other person needs you to put on the false persona. Like if you have a job and you know that your boss won't accept you for being loud, or kind of like certain aspects of your personality. So you put on a false persona in order to maintain that relationship, the working relationship. That's a toxic relationship because you're having to change parts of yourself or conceal parts of yourself. An abusive
Yes.
relationship is where the other person is dictating to you the persona that you have to maintain, so you do not have a choice in it. But also, what often happens is an abusive relationship, they will control you and manipulate you by constantly changing the version of you that you have to be. So a
Yeah.
lot of victims of abuse say that they feel like they're walking on eggshells, and it's because they need to put on a different persona for every mood of the abuser. So they're constantly monitoring, and it's, who do I have to be in order to survive this version of you? So when an abusive relationship happens, you have to have multiple personas for all of their different moods. They will never accept you if you try to voice the difficulties or your struggles or anything else. They will intentionally be harmful, cruel, criticize you. They will dismiss your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions, and they will like gaslight you into believing that it's all your fault, and that, so they won't take any responsibility for the fact that this relationship has required you to change who you are. That they will take that and they will use that against you. Whereas a toxic relationship, sometimes we maintain a toxic relationship because it's like, I'm going to, like, it's not just they need us to be this person in order to maintain a relationship, like with work. Sometimes we don't feel like we would be accepted, or we put on a false persona in order to protect ourselves. Like, I don't feel like you're going to accept my spirituality. Say you've got a
Right.
friend that's very against spirituality and the use of the word universe. So you're like, okay, I'm going to protect myself and this part of me by putting on a false persona, and I simply don't allow you. So a toxic relationship is where you've just got one persona that you use to maintain a relationship with that person. An abusive relationship, you will have multiple personas, and they will be in order to maintain your survival.
Gotcha. Thank you. I think there's so many people that just conflate the two. And I
Yeah.
know I know they are wildly different. And I know you mentioned like the workplace briefly. I know there's a lot of really intelligent women who can relate to issues with being bullied, harassed, persecuted, and just treated poorly in the workplace because of their intelligence, because of their
Mm-hmm.
capability. Can you explain to listeners what toxic relationships in the workplace can look like and how that growing impact is affecting more and more businesses and government entities alike, both of them.
Yeah, so the thing is, we actually have we have a very toxic society where women are have to put on a false persona in order to survive the society that we're actually living in. So we have to smile
Yes.
because like that's expected, and we have to be a particular way, we have to be a particular size, we have to have certain aesthetics in the way that we dress and the way that we behave and the way that we hold ourselves. We cannot laugh too loud, and we cannot talk about bodily functions, and we cannot, if you flick your hair, then you are being too seductive. But then if you have a short hair, then you are being too masculine and everything else. And
Right.
so we are given a lot of parameters. And in order to survive society, we put on different personas. Who do I have to be in order to be accepted by my teachers at school? Who do I have to be in order to be accepted by my friends in my friendship group? And who do I have to be? So then we go into the office and we go into corporate, and it's who do I have to be in order to be accepted by my managers? And a lot of the time, you cannot outsmart your manager, you cannot outspeak your manager, you cannot be better than them in any way, shape, or form, because then you are, usually if your manager is a male, it's like you're emasculating them. And if your
Yep.
manager is a female, you are then competing with her,
Yes.
because there has been a tendency for there to be so little room at the top for women. What it means is that women have to compete with each other in order to get that spot. So instead of supporting each other and nurturing each other and being compassionate and kind of like, backing each other, we have been
Right.
taught to attack and, ridicule and tear each other down.
Yes.
In a toxic relationship in your workplace, that means that you will learn, okay, well, in order to not be attacked and torn down by that manager, I have to stay small. I cannot be too smart. I cannot say my piece. If I have any ideas in business meetings, I cannot vocalize them. So you end up shutting down your potential, because it's safer to do that than actually put yourself out there and risk being attacked by those that are superior to you. And the thing is, your mind is programmed to keep you safe. So no
Yes.
matter how much you want to achieve, your brain is programmed to keep you safe. Your safety is paramount.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
even if you want to go for that promotion, if that promotion means that you are going against a superior that could cause harm or like damage to your life, you won't go for it, and you will
Exactly.
self-sabotage in order to stay safe.
Exactly. Okay. Recording. That was perfect explanation. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I had a similar experience. I used to work in law enforcement, and I was harassed and just bullied on a daily basis by a manager, a female manager who was a narcissist. And it's relatively rare to find a female narcissist, but they do exist. And she was so threatened by me. She eventually fired me for using domestic violence leave, in addition to being like horribly intimidated by me and intimidating to me, excuse me. I mean, she was intimidated by my my degree and my background when I first started, but then she just made it her mission to intimidate me on a daily basis at work. She started threatening my job and terrorizing me to the point where I even developed PTSD over it, in addition to the traumas that I went through in 2020. That was the job I was working at. I was working for Seattle police, and she was telling me routinely I couldn't use my domestic violence leave. And I actually have a pending episode in the works on this, so I won't get too far into it. And by the time our episode releases, it may have already been released. I'm not sure what order these are going to go in, because I look at these and I'm like, oh no, this guest episode is far more exciting. Let's release that first. And so sometimes I do that. But I know our listeners can probably assume this based on our conversation, but I want to be sure that they understand that you're joining us from the UK, which is again
Mhm.
my home away from home. I absolutely adore England. And I want to make sure that they know how, and this is not meant to be a slight at the UK, and at the same time, I think it's just factual that the UK is behind in mental health awareness.
Oh
And
yeah.
even though the US has made a lot of progress in this area, the UK is still behind. Even us, and healing trauma without the stigma publicly and coaching as a profession. These are not looked upon favorably in the UK, because as US citizens, I think a lot of us don't necessarily know that other parts of the world, I mean, US citizens tend to, and I'm generalizing and I'm stereotyping, but we tend to be more like all about us. Like, oh, this is the US and we're the biggest and we're the best and we're the US citizens and there's nobody but us and nobody knows anything else but us. And I mean, and then we come across very poorly to other countries and other parts of the world. And there are eclectic people in the US that travel and have been cultured and have spent time in other parts of the world, and even people like Maddie in episode 6 who have lived in the UK and in other parts of the world. Like, not all of us are, self-aggrandizing, narrow focused, I am the only thing that matters, entitled assholes, let me assure you. For all those other people that listen in the UK, I do have a few UK listeners as well. So I just wanted people to be clear that the other countries aren't nearly as progressive in their efforts to prioritize mental health, especially women's health, trauma healing, doing the work like we finally started to do in the US and do so publicly. And can you tell us just a little bit about what that looks like in the UK in your experience? Because I can't speak to your experience comparatively to the US.
So I think one of the biggest things that hinders in the UK about mental health is, we do have the whole perspective of the stiff upper lip. Like
Yes, yes.
that when it comes to emotional maturity and everything else, I think in the UK we've been conditioned. You don't talk about what goes on behind closed doors. You've got the stiff upper lip. Nobody allows, like, in the UK, it's very uncomfortable to see emotional outbursts. Whereas,
Hmm.
which is why it's quite funny for kind of like it's the whole Karen culture thing that you actually have, and it's
Yeah.
such an American thing because in the UK you do not do that. You
You don't
don't
do
shout
that.
at people, you don't yell at people, you don't like. It's
That's not
like
okay.
it's so strange to see the emotional outbursts and the anger and the frustration being vented in such a public way, because in England you just grit your teeth and you mutter under your breath about, well, I didn't really like the way they spoke to me, and you
Right.
mumble and you wonder away. You don't express
Yes.
emotions the same
Especially not
way. It's
directly to that person. Like you, oh, that
exactly.
asshole under your breath.
Yes, it's just one of those things. It's a very different way of actually dealing with our emotional states and everything in the UK. It is things happen behind closed doors. But then you've also got to consider that whereas in America, because of the health system that you've got, a lot of the responsibility for looking after yourself falls on your own shoulders because of the whole insurance and having to pay for medical care and everything else like that. So that you're a lot more restricted. So a lot in America, a lot more of it has been focused on how do I help myself, personal development. How do I like where can I go to learn and change things? Why? Because we don't have a health system that will enable me to constantly like go there to them. And so it has pushed for mental health to be taken on board by the individuals for you to do that yourself, because you don't have the healthcare system that will necessarily support you in doing that. So that's given you the responsibility of your own mental health. In the UK, people will join a waiting list and then 9 months later get like 6 sessions of CBT, which, as I spoke about before, with somebody that is absolutely clueless as to what it actually means to go through trauma and everything else. Then you get it signed off and then you get sent on your way. And it's like, oh, okay, that's it. I'm fixed now. And
Super
that's it. And
helpful.
then you go on a waiting list again for another year or 2 years. So there is a vast difference, and that in England it's almost so in the UK and those with the NHS, it's very much like we've handed power of our mental health over to professionals that are so overwhelmed by the demand and the need for them that they don't have time. And so it's like a checkbox system, like, okay, here's a prescription, go away and then come back in however long, and we will see if we can actually get you to see a therapist. But people won't pay to go and see a therapist, or they won't go to see a counselor, or they won't go for life coaching. They won't take ownership of their own healing journey upon themselves, because we have been brought up to believe that if there is something wrong with you, you go to the doctors and the NHS will fix you. And the
Right.
NHS doesn't have the capacity to help the people that need it. And so people are ending up on waiting lists, but they still won't take action towards their own mental health. So it's like, there are various things like in America, massive personal development events like Tony Robbins, everything else like that. huge. And people sign up and they go in droves and it's sellout events. And then you've got other ones. So it's kind of, I don't know if you know Rachel Hollis and Dave
Yes,
Hollis.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So when prior to their breakup, so prior to 2020, they were coming over to the UK to do an event, and they were
Hmm.
going to do one of their live events. And actually, it was there just wasn't enough interest to actually deserve everybody, them getting everybody over here and like the entire setup and everything else. There wasn't, whereas in America, massive amounts. The community over there, when it comes to personal development and everything else, the number of people that have actually done it or gone to events or they've heard about them or they know about them, the people that you speak to, it's very common. Whereas here in the UK, I can go and I can speak to people. Like I could stand on the playground at my daughter's school and I could talk and like to like 100 people and say two of them would actually know what I'm talking about when I talk about personal development.
Wow.
And the rest of them would just be looking at me like I'm absolutely nuts. It's that level
Wow.
of the amount of ignorance around it, um, because we just don't talk to each other about that. If somebody asks if you're okay, you just smile and you're like, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm fine.
And then you just talk about the weather and the
Oh,
British
yeah.
language, which is never.
It's like the incompetent therapists that aren't trained in trauma or haven't undertaking the training. I
Yes.
mean, like I know in the U even in the US, they're not required to be trained in trauma, which I think is abhorrent, but that's
Yeah.
a whole nother story. But it's like, take that upon yourself. And I had a friend tell me that a therapist once said, "Well, there's nothing that can't be solved with a good cup of tea." And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Did you really just tell that to like your
Yeah.
patient? Like really? You told that to a patient? Like, do
Mhm.
you realize how much therapy you need?
Yeah. It is, and it is one of those things that it's not understood and
Yeah.
it's not talked about, and like it's quite funny because I talk about it to my daughters a lot, and
Yeah.
so they go
Good.
and they speak to their friends about it.
Good.
And I am such the novelty in kind of like the school, like
Wow.
their friendship groups and everything else. And I did like TikTok videos, and loads of the kids from the school watched it. And it was just, I am such a novelty because I talk about mental health and anxiety and all of this kind of stuff and the
Yeah.
impact it has. And I talk about this, and most of them are like, oh my God, I wish I could talk to my mum about stuff like that. They are suffering in silence.
Yeah,
I
they're
know
suffering.
children that are self-harming, that are unable, that their parents don't know how to deal with it, and so they just pretend it's not happening.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like I know others that are otherwise experiencing anxiety. Um, at my children's school, the kids are having panic attacks, and then they're being sent back into the classroom. So you have a panic attack, and then it's like, okay, well, when you've got yourself together, go back into the classroom, and they're sent back into the classroom after
Whoa.
having a panic attack.
When you get
So,
yourself together, go back to school. Are you kidding me? Oh
so it's
no.
like, it's because it's happening so frequently. My daughter had a panic attack to the point that she blacked out.
Oh my
She lost
God.
consciousness, and when she was well enough, she got sent back into the classroom. And that's why I ended up doing a TikTok about it, because it was just this whole idea that you are teaching our children that even if you are having panic attacks, even if you are unable to breathe, even if you so anxiety attacks and panic attacks, no, pull it together, get back in that classroom, because your attendance is more important than your mental health. I wish it was uncommon in the UK for their schools to be that way. But the response that I got from people talking about their experiences of that exact thing happening in schools. And so our next generation are growing up in schools where they are being taught that having panic attacks is normal, that having anxiety attacks is normal. All you do is get over it and carry on. And this is what's happening in our current educational system. And so when I
That
say
uh
behind the times, like even our next generation are growing up with a very warped idea of what it actually is to look after your mental health.
Absolutely. That's so disappointing. And I mean, it's so sad to hear because Europe in general and the UK as part of Europe is so far ahead of the US in so many ways. In so many ways. I mean, public transportation is my glaring example in the United States. Like public transportation in the United States is just it's just sad. And it's just 100 years or so behind Europe and the UK. And the tube was like the first, underground metro system and the most efficient and the easiest to navigate. And I'll say something, I'll be talking to my friends, blah, 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 the tube. And they're like, what's the tube? And I'm like, oh, it's only the best public transportation system that's ever been designed. And, there it is in the UK, leading the way in England and brilliance. And then so far behind, decades behind the US and when it comes to mental health. But yeah, I mean, because of the infrastructure, because of the system, because of the way we were raised, right? Like, I mean, the way we're raised here is like we didn't have affordable health care for our lives when I was growing up. I mean, that didn't exist until Obama took presidency and created the Affordable Health Care Act, and then that was new. And then by then,
Mhm.
people had already started, working on their mental health, and then COVID exacerbated it and made it much more of a public conversation. And then more and more celebrities started speaking out. And the US follows celebrities, and oh, well, if Taylor Swift says it's important, then it must be important.
Oh,
It's like,
absolutely.
okay. You're like, yes, yes, okay, Taylor Swift. I'm sure she's spoken about mental health. I mean, she seems fairly progressive. I don't actually follow Taylor Swift. I was just using her as an example of a massive, following that generates, people that vote and mental health and everything. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. But I do that. I have ADD. I do that all the time.
It's one of those things, it's just realizing that although it may seem progressive in some ways, and a lot of people look and it's like, oh, the NHS is so incredible and everything else. I think a lot of people hand their power over to professionals, to therapists, and they don't realize the amount of power we actually have over our own healing and our own journeys and everything else, and realizing, hold on, I don't need to wait. Because you can end up in a very toxic relationship with your therapist where you end up in oh, I've forgotten the word now, where you're giving your power over to them and you won't take any action. Codependent. There you go.
Yes, codependent.
Codependent
Yes.
relationship with your
Yes.
therapist, where you wait, I'm not going to take any action and I'm not going to do anything for myself until I go to my next appointment, and then I will speak to them. And then, then I will take whatever action they tell me to take, and then I won't do anything until my next appointment. And so you end up just stagnating and you end up in a codependent relationship where you won't do anything without permission from your therapist who was meant to be there to give you your power back, and instead you've just handed your power over to them. And I think that's what a lot
Exactly.
of British people or a lot of English people in the UK, that's what we've done.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I think, yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. And I know, before we chatted, before we started recording the episode, you mentioned that you're collaborating on a book. That is so exciting. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I am incredibly privileged to be part of a group. So there's 28 of us, 28 women, and we are doing a collaborative book, and it's called Ripples of Positivity. And so it is like our stories. So we've each written a chapter, and it's coming
Love
together. And
that.
it's just about, so if you are interested in kind of like the UK mental health, different experiences, so from disability to experiencing domestic abuse and violence, everything, but it's our journeys of how we've gone through trauma and our experiences and how we've got to like the positive that's actually come out of it, and the lives that we're actually living, and the good things. So and so that's so it is a book of 28 incredible ladies, including me, because I am
I
an
love
incredible
that.
lady. So,
Yes, you are.
but yeah, and so it's really good. It's I'm really, really proud of it.
Do you know when that comes out, or does it have a release date yet?
Um, I believe.
Okay.
So I believe it's we've got the launch party on the 20th of October. So I believe it's 21st of October. But
Oh, it's coming
I
up
will,
fast.
yeah. We've got I think it's 4 weeks today.
Oh, that's incredibly exciting. Okay. Well, hopefully I'll be able to put a link in the show notes
I'm saying four
and
weeks today, but that's the 4 weeks today from the point of recording this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, this will
Podcast
probably
is like,
it takes a while for me to, get episodes edited and released,
mhm.
and so it will be it won't be instantaneous. It won't be a week or two. Like it'll be a while before I get the
Yeah.
episode released. So, getting back to it, I would love to end the show with our quick quiz question round, which are mostly personal, but there are some related show material questions. What piece of art, movie, show, or any creative work was incredibly influential for you and why?
Um, so I've always loved Salvador Dali. And
Yes.
so the melting clocks, I always found really fascinating. This whole like it the whole warped idea of like time and things and just like and then he did a follow-up piece and I think it was called the disillusionment of time or something, where it's the same image, but all of the clocks are kind of coming apart in squares. But it's just like
Mm,
Salvador Dali and the kind of like looking at the world from a different perspective and just realizing like it's just that whole creativity and seeing
yes.
things and just realizing that there are people that just have these ideas and it opened up my mind to the way other people view things and I'm fascinated by it.
Yes, which can be so drastically different. I love other people's
Yeah.
perspectives. This is one of the reasons I love to travel, is I see other perspectives of the world and other cultural perspectives, not just other humans' perspectives. And the United States
Mm.
is somewhat parochial in its view of things. And I've been to far more countries than I have states, and I have little desire to see a lot of the states. I mean, if somebody gives me compelling reasons, then I'll, go and visit a state. But I'm sure there's beautiful states that I haven't seen because there's hardly any states that I have seen. But there's, gorgeous countries that and I just want to explore.
Yeah.
Anyway, squirrel. What do you do to decompress?
Um, Dance.
I love that.
So
Yes.
it's like I did used to do ballroom and Latin dancing. I mean, how very like British of me, like
Oh, I
thinking
love
to be
that.
doing ballroom dancing. But no, so I did used to do like ballroom and Latin dancing back before Strictly
Okay,
and then
okay.
before Dancing with the Stars. It was way back when. But I loved it. But I love dance. I love movement. I love listening to music, different music that evokes different emotions and just the processing
Yes.
of it, the physical just kind of like release. I love dance.
Well, and it's so good for our central nervous system. And I think people forget that, dance and play and movement and jumping and running and, whatever you find enjoyable is good for your central nervous system. And it's good for your mental health. It's good for your physical health. And it's actually, I recommend this book earlier in the podcast, and I can't remember which episode. It's called Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. And I think it's in that book, or maybe it's in Brene Brown's book, that they reference that like dance and like cooking and without distractions, without phones, without screens is like actually considered rest. Like it's rest for your mental health. It's rest for your body, even though you're not physically resting. Like our definition of rest is like this narrow-minded, oh, if we're sitting on our ass or if we're taking a nap, that's rest. Well,
Yeah.
there's actually more ways to rest, you know?
Yeah. So it's
Yes.
like I say that like we've got I say that everybody's got like a bubble where they actually have like a thing that brings them joy.
Yes.
Like, and so my partner, photography, like you get him behind a camera, taking photos, being creative,
I
and
love it.
it's like he just like this weird calm comes over him. And
Yes.
he's just, and it's like, I'm like, he's in his bubble. He's in his little bubble. For me, it's dance. Like if I start dancing and moving and listening to songs and music and and having the freedom and I will just dance around. And that's my bubble. It's my, and I think everybody has different things that when they find it, it's almost like you feel like you've come home. Like
Yes.
this deep soul, like, oh, I'm home. And it's that. And that no matter how active it is, that's rest to me. That's it.
Yes, it's kind of like I think some people describe it as getting in the zone, and it's that feeling of
Hmm.
like calm and clarity, and like and you just feel so comfortable and knowing, and like you could focus for hours and not even realize how much time has gone by.
Yeah, it's like the rest of the world is just muffled and
Right,
you're
the
just
rest of the world.
there.
Exactly, exactly. What's the last self-improvement or trauma book or show that you read or saw and highly recommend?
Your podcast.
Oh, I love that. Thank
I've
you.
been
I love
binging on
that.
that. But then it's like, uh, I think you'll know this one. So
Yes.
That one.
Yes. Yeah, I love that book.
Yeah. So that's a fabulous book. And
She
then
held up the How
also,
to Do the Work by Nicole LaPera.
oh yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. No, no, it's fine.
Being on camera. So How to Do the Work. And then I love this Succulent Wild Woman, Dancing with Your Wonderful Self by Stark.
Oh,
And
I need to
this
read that.
book, and I love it because like the writing and everything in it, it's almost like she's written it like a journal.
Oh, I like
And
that.
there's like it's colorful writing and it's not like scripted. It's not one of these books that's about like personal development that's telling you do this, do this. It's like a journey. It's like a friend. That's how it feels to me when I read it. It's like reading a book from a friend. And that's what I love. So
I
that's a
love that.
Succulent Wild Woman.
Succulent Wild Woman. I will put the link in the show notes and the How to Do the Work. Which is such a good place to start. How to Do the Work is just such a good place to start for anybody that's like not able to get in with a therapist or you've just
Yeah, exactly.
started.
It's like what I love about it. So it's like you've got like at the end of each chapter, it says how to do the work, and then it gives you like tasks. So
Yes.
it's
Yes.
and I
Which
love
any
that. And
good therapist will give you.
yeah, and it means that you can actually, even if you don't manage to go to a therapist, even if you can't, if you can get to a library and you can get books where you can get these free resources. So
Yes.
even if you can't buy the book, then go to a library, find out where can you get this book for free and get the book, and then you can write it or like write out the tasks, like read the book, write out the tasks, and then refer back to those tasks whenever you need to because you've
Exactly.
already got the knowledge because you've read the chapter. And so all you need to do, these are my journaling prompts that I'm going to use, and this is what I'm going to do. And I need to, and you build up a kind of, you start amassing things that you can do, and you don't have to like you don't have to pay. And then you
Exactly.
follow them on social media and they will give you additional tips and everything else like that. It becomes something that you don't have to invest massively in if you can't.
Exactly. Exactly. And you don't have to buy these books and you can just I reserve them on audiobook for the library because I consume the most in audiobook. I'm a voracious audiobook listener, but if you give me a physical book, it'll take me months to read it. I don't have the time.
So this book, How to Do the Work, I actually listened to on Audible, and so the audio book, and then I bought the book
Love that.
because I took the notes and stuff, but because I actually found them so beneficial, I
Yeah,
was
you
like,
bought the
I
physical
want
copy.
I want a physical copy where I can actually on certain times when I'm struggling with certain aspects, and now I've got my little tags in there so I can go to it. And it was like, do the work, meet your shadow. And so I can, and I've got the tasks here. When I listen to them on like audio, I don't necessarily have something with me to write or do. So, like I'll be driving and I'll be like, oh, I need to remember to do that. Whereas I actually found the advice in this book so good that I actually got it so that I've got the tasks to do.
It is. It's a really good one. I'd say that's in my top 10 for sure. Maybe even top five. That's a really good one. It's a really good one. I love that. Thank you.
It's a
What
great place to
movie?
start.
What's that?
Movie. I'd
Well,
say that
I
book's a good place to start.
it
So
is it's an excellent place to start.
yeah.
What movie or book are you currently recommending to anybody who will listen?
I actually ask for recommendations a lot more than I
I love
give
that.
recommendations. Because of running my own business and having four daughters and everything else, I'm actually so behind on a lot of things. So I like
Yeah, no worries.
asking things because I find it really interesting to see what people suggest.
Yeah.
Um, so if I was going to recommend a book, I would recommend Succulent Wild Woman and but
Yes.
like actually I recommend I ask people like
Tell me
what
what you
what do you,
recommend.
yeah, tell me what do you recommend? And you can learn a lot from people depending on
I love
sometimes
that.
people will recommend something and I'm like, really? That's
Yeah.
the it's like
Right, like that was what like I was so surprised. I was through the conversation I had with Raimi in episode 5. She's a TikTok and travel influencer on Instagram and TikTok, and she's just, brilliant and has done her trauma work and has done a lot of
mhm.
healing and inner work on herself. And she had the most interesting movie recommendations that I didn't expect, and I didn't expect her to, I mean, she's done so much traveling, and so I shouldn't be surprised that she recommended, a couple of foreign films, but one of
Mhm.
them was Korean, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to watch it. And I haven't watched it yet, but I can't wait to watch it. I was like,
Yeah.
I get the best recommendations from people, from my guests and friends in general. But I
Yeah.
love that. Thank you. What's at the very top of your travel bucket list or wish list?
So I was actually born in South Africa.
Oh, how cool.
Um, and so I would love to go back, but I would want to feel safe.
Yes.
That's my big thing. So like we moved back. So my parents were from Manchester and they went and got jobs over there. Um, and so because my father was an engineer, so he loved it over there, uh,
Yeah.
white man power.
Yeah, white man. Yeah. White
In the
man, upper middle
70s.
class,
He was
doing just
in
fine.
everything, like, and so
Yeah.
it was. But my mum didn't. She didn't want to raise us in a country where we were second class citizens simply because she had three daughters. She was like, I don't want you to have permission to open a bank account and do this and do that and everything else.
Yeah.
Um, and so she didn't want us to feel that way or feel intimidated. So we moved back to the UK for more opportunities for me and my sisters growing up. But I would love to go back there, and I would love to take my mum because like she left part of her heart there. She loved it, the views, the scenery, and I would just love to go and just watch her light up as she's like, this is what we used to do. This is where you were a child on this beach and Santa came up on a speedboat because they don't have sleighs and everything else. It's their summer, and we were over there and we had a barbecue so I'd love to go back and have her get to share those memories and the good times that she had with me.
I love that. I love that. What is the best travel story you've ever heard or your best travel story?
My partner and I lost the Eiffel Tower in Paris. So
I love it.
we
You're like, Where the fuck did it go?"
It was okay. So we were at the Louvre, and like, okay, in my defense, we're British. We have no concept of distance. Like to us, like I get in my car and I
Mhm.
think that an hour drive is a long drive. Now, for Americans, you're just like, yeah, I'm barely off my driveway, and I'm just like,
Yes.
oh my God, I'm halfway to Scotland. Like
Yeah,
this is not. Our concept of space is distorted. We
it
really do.
is. It
So
is.
we were at the Louvre and then we looked, we were like, oh, the Eiffel Tower's just over there. We started walking. This was really late. And a bottle of wine later.
It's not quite just over there.
It's not. So we started walking towards it. But as we got closer, the buildings got taller so we couldn't see past the buildings
Oh
to
shit.
see where the Eiffel Tower was because it was like the perspective.
You're like, where to go? Where to go?
So we're walking, we're like looking around corners trying to figure out where's the Eiffel Tower gone. We did eventually found it, then found out that even though it was ridiculously late, it
Yeah.
was like there was a restaurant open, so we got another bottle of wine and had some food.
Oh, good.
And they were like, oh, it didn't take us that long to get here. Walk back.
You walked back. Holy shit. Good for you.
I mean, but by this time we were really rather drunk, and so we were walking along the river, and we were kind of like, and there was a massive grass patch between us and the road, and so we're
Yeah.
like, oh, we should get a taxi to get back because it's going to be so much quicker, and then just continued to walk down the river and didn't get any closer to the road and go, oh yeah, we should do that. Still didn't. Eventually we got back to the hotel and it was just like, can't believe we lost the Eiffel Tower in Paris, but we did so so
It's not impossible to lose.
yeah. The thing is, because you're close to the buildings, you can't see past the buildings
Yeah.
because it's big and it's in the way. So we didn't know. So yeah, we managed to lose the Eiffel Tower in Paris.
I love
It
that.
is
I
still
love
there.
that.
It's
I've
fine.
gotten
It's
lost in the Louvre and fallen asleep in the Louvre, so I mean
fine.
it's not impossible to lose the Eiffel Tower. The Louvre is massive. It's massive. What
Like it's a massive landmark with loads of things, but like
oh,
everybody
it's
knows.
huge.
Yeah, but no, as we were walking towards it, we just couldn't figure out, like, because we couldn't see past the buildings, we didn't know which direction to actually head into to
I
find
love
it.
it. I love that. I love that. What is the most useful travel purchase or item or items you've ever made?
I think going on the fact that I managed to lose monuments pretty easily. Shoes, comfortable shoes. And like nothing
Yes.
can make a holiday worse than sore feet. So the
Yes. Yes.
purchase that you can ever make when traveling, comfortable shoes. Like
Yes.
I would choose style over I would choose comfort over style when it actually comes to traveling because it's like
Yes.
I am not going to enjoy my time. I'm not going to have so yeah, comfortable shoes are a must for me because I like to explore and I also get lost really easily. So comfortable shoes
Same.
are my
Same.
hands down must.
Same. I have like extremely wide feet, and so I call myself somebody who has special feet needs. And so I have to have like very, very roomy shoes. Like I know Uggs I don't think they're particularly attractive, but they're so comfortable. They're
Mhm.
so comfortable, and I can walk long distances in them, especially in Europe in the winter, which I often visit Europe in the winter. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm wearing my ugly Ugg boots, and I'm happy with that because my feet are happy.
I do have limits. Like I this might be slightly polarizing, but Crocs. I won't wear Crocs. Like
I
I'm not
can't.
gonna walk around. I'm not
I don't
gonna
think they're
walk
all that
around Europe
comfortable.
wearing Crocs.
I know. I wear those at home and I wear them in the garden, but I don't wear them out in public because I have my limits as well. I'm like, even if I found them the most comfortable shoes ever, they are just unattractive, in
Yeah.
my
So
opinion. And some
so
people love them,
comfortable shoes, absolute must, except Crocs.
except Crocs. I mean,
Except
they're just not attractive. I mean, for the most part, they're just not attractive. And some people love them, and more power to you. Like, get down with your bad self.
yeah.
Whatever you love, get down with your
Oh,
bad self.
absolutely. I fully support people that choose to wear them, but it's just like I probably take them off for every single photo of my holiday. Like,
Yes.
here are your holiday snaps.
Hang on,
Why
let
are
me
you
take my shoes off.
putting all of them? Well,
I had to be.
I had to be.
Um, the foodie in me has to know what is for dinner tonight.
Bangers and mash.
Oh, I love bangers and mash. I don't think
It,
the US citizens can fully appreciate like good bangers because we don't have it over here. And I mean, you
mhm.
can find it like in specialty shops. Like, I mean, I live in a very populated, I live in the Seattle area, and there's a British pantry shop where it actually has pretty decent bangers, but it's one shop in all of Washington state that I've found where you can get decent bangers in this entire state. And so
Yeah,
I think it's not well known that the bangers and mash in the UK is nothing like what we find here in the US. Like even in British pubs and even in Irish pubs that we have here, and I've had the bangers and mash in our local Irish pubs, it's nothing like the stuff in the UK. I mean, the UK
yeah.
is just unparalleled. The food is just delicious, and I think the food, especially to US citizens, gets this like, what do you mean British food is good? British food is amazing. You just haven't had the right British food.
Yeah, I think it is one of those things that it's kind of it depends. Like to me, British food is comfort food
Yes.
because we've now reached the point where it's getting cold. Like autumn's well and truly on
Yes.
its way here. It is raining. It is getting darker early,
Yeah,
and
same here.
having like the mashed potatoes with some decent
Mm,
sausages, which aren't like completely pureed to a pulp. It's like it's got the texture and stuff and so you've got the decent sausages and then some gravy. It's just that comfort food. And
yes.
so like when we get to autumn, I'm like, yeah, bangers and mash.
Oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. What four songs or any music really would describe you to somebody who doesn't know you?
Um, so I don't know how popular it actually was in America, but on Netflix they did a musical version of Roald Dahl's Matilda.
Oh, okay.
And so they did this musical version, and one of the songs on there is called Naughty. And so it's like sometimes you've got to be a little bit naughty. But it is one of those things. It's kind of like, and so going along the lyrics, it's like Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. The inevitable fall was inevitable. Um, they didn't have a choice. They were written that way. And it's just this whole thing of kind of like Romeo and Juliet and their fates. But what if they could have changed their story? What if they could have changed their narrative? And
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to be a little bit naughty. Sometimes you've got to go against the grain. Sometimes you've got to push back and go, no, no, no. I'm not going to go along with, I'm going to rewrite my story. And I
Yes.
love that. So
I
I
love that as
that's
well.
that's one of mine. But it's a bit obscure because it's like, unless you've seen it,
Unless you see it,
it's
you
not.
don't really understand the context. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, so that.
I love
Um,
that.
and then I'd think like, this is me from Greatest Showman, like just, and not because I have to pluck a hair, a rogue hair that grows out of my chin. And that's not the only reason. I'm at that age now where I have to pluck the rogue hairs. That's not the reason that I relate to that song. I just love the power of the song.
Yeah, no, it's
So
good. It's good.
yeah,
What,
yeah.
go ahead.
It's a bit difficult, isn't it? Too many good
Yeah.
choices.
There's so many good choices. Last but certainly not least, what advice would you give for somebody who's struggling with not being able to find a therapist?
Um, you have more power than you actually think about your mental health. And so it's that aspect of you know you better than any professional ever will, which means you
Yes.
can heal you more than any professional ever will when it comes to your mental health. Like they are not going to be able to understand your thoughts, your ideas, the way your brain processes things, the way that you can. So if you
Yes.
realize that and you say, okay, all they can do is shine a light on me and what I already know, that's when you realize, ah, I can actually do that for myself. So I do, there is a lot of help out there and it can really help, but a lot of it, you can reclaim your power. Like the
Yes.
whole thing with coaching is where you ask questions to help people find the answer themselves. And it's based on the knowledge, it's based on the whole principle that everybody, you have all of the answers within you. You just need somebody to help you get to those answers.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you walk into everything with that idea of, I already know the answers, I can already do this, like if you choose to seek help, amazing, but that help is actually optional. You can look for the details, you can, have a look at yourself, have the conversations with yourself. If you want somebody to speak to about, oh, I want more confidence, well, then have a look at yourself and say, okay, well, what parts of me do I not feel confident about? And what can I do about that? Like somebody else
Yes.
isn't going to give you confidence. You have the power to give yourself confidence because it's all about how you perceive yourself. And so have better conversations with yourself. Do mirror
Exactly.
talks and all of this. There are so many free resources available, but the biggest one is learn to listen to yourself.
Yes.
And then you will find out that you don't need to listen to other people as much in order to hear what you already know.
Yes.
Our
Thank
listeners
you.
get
Get a hold of you to work with you directly because after hearing this, I know they're going to be wanting to contact you.
I think the best place is actually Instagram. So if you go to www.instagram.com/ and then it's Louise, Louise dot Anne, Anne dot coaching. And so you can find me on there and you can reach out and just start a conversation with me. Send me a DM and just kind of like let me know what's going on. I'm quite happy to talk to people. And so just reach out to me on there.
I love that. I love that. Instagram is the best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And I will have the link in the show notes for everybody, but just sometimes it's easier for people to listen to it. I know that for me, I'm so guilty of this when I listened to, and I do listen to other podcasts. I rarely go look in the show notes and I listen. I'm like, oh, I can look her up. And then I just type it in. And instead of like going to click on links, I'm like, no, that takes too much effort. I'm not clicking in things.
Yeah, so it's like all of my social media actually has the same extension, Louise dot Anne, Anne dot coaching. So all of them.
Perfect.
So if you type that in on Facebook, you will find me on there, or LinkedIn, I'm same on there. And so it is, it's kind of I'm everywhere the same.
Perfect. And I will have you on my Instagram as well in case users want to access my Instagram, which I know that listeners often know my Instagram is Missy the Traveler, and I'm Missy.traveler on TikTok. And then you can look up Louisiane from my profile as well.
Mhm.
But thank you so much for taking this time. This has just been amazing, and I'm so excited to have you on. I hope to have you on again in the future for a part two, because this is it's just invaluable information that I think people
If
need to hear.
anybody ever wants to hear what I have to say ever again, they go, "Oh my gosh, that was such a long episode." Like,
Oh, but it's so good. It's so good. I like long episodes because you just get so much more content. You get more quality
yeah.
content. Like, I mean, I listen to audiobooks in the car. I can listen to something like 8, 12 hours. I mean, obviously not
Mhm.
consecutive. But you can come back and take a break and then listen to the rest of it. Like I'm more than fine with a long episode. Hopefully the listeners appreciate it. And if not, then that's okay too. Then it's not the right episode for them. And that's
Or you
okay.
can always listen to it on double time and then it's half the length.
That's exactly so that's how I listen to my audiobooks.
Oh my God, me too.
Because I have the ADHD brain that's like, no, must hear faster. Go, 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 go.
Mhm. I listen to voice notes the same way. So everybody to me is
Yes.
a chipmunk.
Yes, it goes so fast. And I know it sounds ridiculous to some people, but my brain processes that quickly and I'm like, and I can keep up and I like listening to audiobooks like that. So yes, thank you so much for taking the time. I deeply appreciate it. And yeah, I hope to have you on again in the future.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, darling.
Thank you.